Every day, we see the darker side of the world around us. We witness how people can hurt others in ways that are hard to understand. It's a sad part of life, but it's something we can't ignore. As someone who dives into the world of crime, I'm here to share the most shocking stories and try to understand what drives people to do such things. I'm Michael, and today, I've got another unreal true crime story for you. Just after midnight on a quiet July night in Melbourne, Nicholas Cameron stepped out of his apartment for a late-night walk with his dog. It was something he did every night, nothing out of the ordinary. The streets were calm and the city lights flickered in the distance. But someone was waiting for him, hiding in the shadows. Without warning, a figure jumped out. A sudden attack. The sound of metal hitting flesh. Nick's desperate cries for help filled the parking garage, but no one got there in time. What happened next shocked everyone. It wasn't a random crime. This attack was planned, calculated, and when police started digging, they uncovered a dark story of control, jealousy, and betrayal, one that led them to a surprising mastermind behind it all. Nicholas Cameron, known as Nick to his family and friends, was born on November 6, 1981 in Australia. While the exact city remains unknown, he grew up alongside his two siblings, Gemma and Lucas. His mother, Mary Cameron, and his father eventually went their separate ways, and she later remarried a man named Frank. Despite the family changes, Nick maintained a good relationship with both his biological father and stepfather. Through his mother's second marriage, he gained 5 step-siblings, Corey, Stacy, Josh, Beck, and Jess, who became part of his extended family. Little is known about Nick's early years, personal life, or education, but some sources indicate that he worked as a landscaper. Outside of his job, he had a talent for football, though he never pursued it professionally. However, Nick's life wasn't as straightforward as it seemed. Reports suggest that, alongside his legitimate work, he was involved in small-scale methamphetamine distribution. In his personal life, he was in an on-again, off-again relationship with Haida Boss, a hairstylist 3 years younger than him. Haida had a teenage son from a previous relationship, and the loss of the boy's father in a car accident had left a lasting emotional impact on her. Struggling with substance abuse issues that worsened after her former partner's death, Haida found herself in a turbulent and unstable relationship with Nick. Those who knew them described their dynamic as volatile, with frequent ups and downs. Heidi reportedly referred to Nick as an ungrateful idiot, a reflection of the ongoing tension between them. While Nick could be controlling and unpleasant toward her, there was no record of him ever being physically abusive. The instability in their relationship was further fueled by infidelities on both sides. Nick was secretly involved with another woman named Marnie, a relationship that was far from fleeting. Marnie was expecting his child. Meanwhile, Haida led a double life of her own. Unbeknownst to Nick, she had an alternate persona in a private online community where she engaged with partners who shared her particular interests. She had already found someone willing to take on a submissive role in their dynamic. By early July 2021, the couple's relationship showed no signs of improvement, though nothing suggested an impending tragedy. However, fate had other plans. On the night of July 10th, just after midnight, Nick left his apartment in South Bank, Melbourne, for his usual walk with his dog. As he reached the parking area of his building, he was ambushed in a sudden and brutal attack. His assailant, an unknown man, wielded both a hammer and a knife. The assault lasted an agonizing 11 minutes, leaving Nick gravely injured between two parked cars. His screams echoed through the parking lot as he begged his attacker to stop. Concerned neighbors quickly called for help, but by the time police officers arrived, just 6 minutes after the first distress calls, it was too late. Nick, 39 years old, lay covered in blood, his body bearing multiple stab wounds and severe blunt force injuries. Though emergency services responded swiftly, their efforts to save him were in vain. At 12:45 a.m., he was pronounced dead at the scene. Meanwhile, the perpetrator made an attempt to flee, but police apprehended him near the crime scene. He was identified as 48-year-old Stuart Heron. When officers arrested him, he was still in possession of the murder weapons, along with Nick's house keys and dog leash. During questioning, Heron claimed he had been waiting for hours to confront Nick, a man he did not know personally but had allegedly seen selling drugs to minors. At first, Heron's explanation painted him as a vigilante acting in the interest of the community. However, as authorities dug deeper, disturbing new details came to light. Security footage from the parking lot became crucial evidence, helping investigators piece together the full story. Fortunately, surveillance cameras captured the exact moment when Stewart, armed with a hammer and a sharp object, emerged from behind a pillar where he had been hiding and launched his ruthless attack. As part of their investigation, officers searched Stewart's Land Cruiser, which was parked near the crime scene. Inside, they found a notebook containing extensive details about Nick, his apartment building's name, address, the time he was usually home, and even an inventory of his valuable belongings, including cash stored in two safes inside his apartment. When police examined Stewart's phone, they discovered a folder labeled Target, filled with alarming information about Nick's residence. It included a detailed layout of his apartment, pictures of his dog, and even the code to his safe. This level of detail suggested that Stewart had meticulously planned the attack and had inside knowledge, possibly from someone close to Nick. Then came the most shocking revelation. Another folder on Stewart's phone, titled Haida, contained screenshots of messages exchanged between him and Nick's girlfriend. It quickly became evident to investigators that Stewart had been recruited by Haida to harm her boyfriend. This discovery changed the course of the investigation, revealing a far more sinister motive behind the attack. Authorities soon learned that Stewart, a former fuel mechanic and owner of a towing and repair business, had met Haida just 2 months before the crime. At the time, Stewart, who was known to be somewhat of a loner, was struggling with depression following the death of his dog. His path crossed with Haida on an online platform catering to people interested in exploring alternative relationship dynamics. On the site, Haida went by the name Hedonistic Siren, while Stewart used the alias Slave Pinto. They quickly became involved in an unconventional dominant-submissive relationship. Despite the nature of the website, their connection did not initially appear to be intimate. Stewart openly displayed his devotion to Haida on his profile, boasting about the numerous roles he fulfilled for her, which ranged from personal servant to cook, cleaner, masseur, handyman, mechanic, and even financial provider. He also expressed his unwavering commitment to following her every command, proudly declaring himself her lifelong subordinate. Investigators determined that, as their relationship deepened, Haida gradually confided in Stewart about her resentment toward Nick. She painted a picture of emotional distress, claiming that her boyfriend made her feel awful, unwanted, insecure, needy, and foolish. She described his behavior as uniquely cruel and emotionally wounding. In the messages obtained by police, she referred to Nick as a loser and voiced her desire to kick him out of her life for good. Eager to please his dominant partner, Stewart responded with unwavering loyalty. He assured Haida that if she ever needed anything, distraction, companionship, or a way out of her situation, he would be there for her. By June 31st, while at Stewart's apartment, Haida brought up the idea of confronting Nick and forcing him to leave town permanently. They devised a plan, with Stewart insisting he could be very persuasive. He confidently told Haida he was 99.9% sure he could make Nick disappear from her life. Haida then provided him with crucial details, including Nick's address, the location of his apartment safe, and even where he kept a spare key taped to an electrical pole outside his building. According to Stewart's later statements to the police, he began closely monitoring Nick's movements, both in person and online. On July 4th, he conducted a 7-hour surveillance mission at Nick's residence, managing to enter the building but stopping short of taking action at that time. Then, on July 9th, after another heated argument with Nick, Heidi contacted Stewart and gave him the green light to move forward. The plan was for Stewart to ambush Nick outside his apartment, intimidate him, and give him a serious scare. Heidi played her part by trying to lure Nick out of his home, inviting him to visit her at 12:30 a.m., fully aware that Stewart would be waiting in the shadows. At some point, the plan spiraled out of control, leading to the brutal attack on Nick that we previously described. Investigators later discovered that 2 hours after the murder, Heidi sent a text message to Stewart stating that she had changed her mind. What she didn't realize was that Nick had already left his apartment shortly after receiving her message, and by then, he had already been killed by the man she treated as her personal possession. Whether she truly intended to call off the plan or was simply trying to cover her tracks was something the authorities had to determine, but proving it would not be easy. Even with Stewart behind bars and facing overwhelming evidence, he refused to testify against Haida. As a result, it took investigators nearly 6 weeks to compile enough evidence to arrest her. Initially, Haida denied knowing Stewart at all. However, she was forced to admit their connection when police uncovered a $2,000 bank transfer linking them. During an interrogation following her arrest, Haida attempted to explain the nature of their relationship. She described the dominant submissive dynamic in which she was superior, and Stewart's role was to prioritize her needs above all else. According to her, in this type of arrangement, submissives are expected to do whatever it takes to make their dominant partner's life easier, even if that meant crossing moral and legal boundaries. This explanation shed light on why Stewart had gone to such extreme lengths to please her. As a result of her involvement in Nick's death, Haida was charged with murder. However, during her first court appearance, she filed for bail, claiming that she had only intended for Stewart to intimidate Nick and never expected him to use weapons or take his life. Her defense attorney argued that the prosecution's case was weak and lacked substantial evidence. Prosecutors, on the other hand, strongly opposed her release. They contended that Haida had not only conspired against Nick, despite being his girlfriend, but had also provided Stewart with critical information about the security of his apartment building and actively lured him outside through text messages. These elements, in the prosecution's view, demonstrated her deep involvement in the crime. Ultimately, the judge denied her bail request, stating that, unlike her defense attorney, he was not convinced the prosecution's case was weak. By November 2023, Haida, who was 37 at the time, sought a reduced charge, pleading guilty to manslaughter on November 29th. In an earlier hearing, her lawyer argued that while Haida suspected Stewart had ties to outlaw motorcycle gangs, she never explicitly instructed him to kill Nick. The court also heard that in the months leading up to the crime, Haida's mental state had significantly deteriorated. Her struggles stemmed from a failed marriage and the tragic loss of her former husband in a car accident. Following this, she developed a worsening drug addiction, one that escalated when she became involved with Nick, who was already engaged in illicit drug trafficking. Taking all factors into account, the judge acknowledged that Haida had reached a breaking point when she devised her reckless plan with her co-defendant to intimidate Nick. He also noted that she was suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder following the death of her former husband and had worked hard to raise her son while keeping her struggles to herself. However, despite these considerations and her strong potential for rehabilitation, none of it could exempt her from facing justice for her role in the events that led to Nick's death. Heidi was sentenced to 6 years and 3 months in prison, with the possibility of parole after serving 3 years and 3 months. Given the 580 days she had already spent in pretrial detention, she could be eligible for release in as little as 18 months. As for Stewart, he initially pleaded not guilty to Nick's murder, and his trial was set for May 2023. However, in March of that year, he reversed his plea to guilty, following in Haida's footsteps. In August, he appeared before the Supreme Court of Victoria for a pre-sentencing hearing. During the proceedings, the prosecution revisited the details of the case, emphasizing the sheer brutality of the attack. According to the prosecution's timeline, Stewart arrived near Nick's apartment building at approximately 8:05 p.m. on July 9th, mistakenly hiding near what he believed was his victim's car. After realizing his error, he entered the Level 3 parking garage at 10:37 p.m. through an open gate. He then concealed himself behind a pillar, waiting for the perfect moment before launching his merciless assault. For the first time, it was publicly revealed that Nick had suffered 14 skull fractures, a gruesome detail that had previously been withheld. This, along with numerous other injuries, painted a harrowing picture of the ferocity of the attack. During the hearing, Stewart's lawyer argued that his client had lived an ordinary life until he met Heidi. It was also disclosed that Stewart had confided in a psychologist, admitting that his involvement in the crime was the worst decision of his life. The judge expressed his astonishment at the entire situation. To him, it appeared that Stewart had been infatuated with Haida, hoping for something more in his moment of loneliness. Caught up in a world of fantasy, power dynamics, and servitude, he had, for reasons unknown, agreed to partake in this reckless scheme. The judge observed that, aside from this incident, Stewart had led a life free of serious wrongdoing, making it difficult to reconcile his past with the savage, frenzied, and relentless nature of the crime he committed. This stark contrast between his former life and his descent into violence highlighted the complexity of his situation and the profound influence Haida had over him. Ultimately, Stewart was sentenced to 22 years in prison. He would be required to serve at least 15 years before being eligible for parole. The court credited him with the 2 years he had already spent in pretrial detention. As the sentence was delivered, Nick's family embraced one another in the courtroom, finding some solace in the justice served. However, not everyone remained silent. One onlooker spoke out against Stewart, declaring that his fate was sealed and that he was now doomed to face the full consequences of his actions. Thanks for tuning in to Unreal True Crime. If you're intrigued by mysteries from around the world, check out our new channel, Latin Crimes, where we dive into the gripping true crime stories of Latin America. Don't miss out. Subscribe now for more thrilling investigations.